Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's so good to have you here. It's Sunday, October 6th, over a week since I last saw you guys. On the last episode, we were getting ready for Hurricane Helene to impact us in this area, but at the very last minute, this hurricane made a little shift east and the eye wall came over Greenville. I have to tell you guys, it was the scariest night of my life. We had winds that had to have been over 100 miles an hour. We don't really know how high the winds got here because our local weather station's wind reader broke. As you guys know, I brought my 90-year-old grandmother here the day before the storm just to get her settled in, and she stayed up with me all night. And at one point during the eye wall, I heard a large crack, and I kept hearing this really loud crack, and I knew it was a tree coming down. If you've followed the show for a while, you know I've had a couple of trees hit my house during bad storms. I literally pull her off the couch. We kind of go into the next room. I'm yelling for my kids, and it actually caught on a tree that was right beside it and guided it over into my neighbor's yard. The top of the tree, the leaves just touching their brick on their house. If it had come in either one of our houses, I don't even want to think what would have happened. I had a little bit of damage. I mean, I can't complain compared to so many just up the road in Western North Carolina, but a lot of people have asked about Fruit Loop. So I didn't hear from Fruit Loop for over 24 hours after the storm. And where the hiding place is, they're in a holler, which is just a little valley between two mountains. Our cell phone service was so bad right after the storm. Really, today it's still very spotty. But I thought, okay, they just don't have Wi Fi. They're in a remote place. Before they got their Wi-Fi, it was impossible to get them on the phone sometimes. So I literally packed a bag and I was filling up my Camelback with water to just drive as far as I could and then hike the rest of the way into where they were. And she texted me and said, "We're alive, we're out." But the damage was so bad that they had to hike out with Fruit Loop, Brienne, two small kids and a dog, and then several packs that were 70 pounds each. And they came and stayed here. And at one point, I had 10 people in my house. I want to just thank everybody who sent a donation because it truly helped. I do have power. My internet's still a little spotty, but other people in this area in Greenville still don't have power, including my grandmother, who's still here, by the way. And Western North Carolina, a place that if you live in the upstate of South Carolina, it is just where we go for some peace and serenity. Asheville's my favorite. You guys know I go to Asheville a good bit. Total devastation. I'm sure you guys have seen it on the news. We all know somebody who we haven't heard from and just hoping that they're okay and there's no cell service. So just keep this whole area in your thoughts. Those of you on the western side of Florida, another big one coming. So keep an eye on the news. So my plan today is to go through a couple of cases, summarize what's been happening in the week since I've been away. And Sarah Boone is supposed to start tomorrow. I will be live streaming and recapping that daily. However, Orlando is under a state of emergency due to this new storm that's coming through. I really do expect jury selection could be delayed in this, but we'll see. I don't think that they're going to have government offices open when they're expecting really powerful winds and rain, but I'll keep you updated. So on YouTube, I'll just do a little YouTube short if I hear anything about the delay. Otherwise, come hang out with us and chit chat while this trial's going on. I'm skipping a music fact because we just talked about the hurricane and that took a bit of time. Tomorrow, I plan to do an update episode on Diddy. There's been some developments in that case. And then I'll update on Sarah Boone as far as what happened in the hearing last week. I just couldn't fit everything into this. I have a lot of things to do after this, but I did want to get an update episode in today. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, as you know, she's the armorer from the Rust movie with Alec Baldwin. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Helene Hutchins on that film set. We all know that Alec Baldwin's charges were dismissed after it was revealed during his trial that 45 caliber ammunition was turned in by a friend of Hannah's dad to the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. Now, those rounds were cataloged separately from the other rust evidence, and the prosecutor, Carrie Morrissey, gave the okay to do so. That violated Brady law. We know that Baldwin's charges were dismissed, cannot be retried for that, even though she is still asking the judge to have another go at it. Won't happen. Back to Hannah. Judge Marlo Summers ruled that Hannah's conviction will stand. Hannah's argument was there was misconduct and suppression of evidence by law enforcement. Now, the judge also denied the defense request that Hannah be released while her appeal is pending. Judge Summers said in her ruling, with respect to the defendant's arguments concerning her request for release pending appeal, the court finds that the defendant has not established by clear and convincing evidence that defendant is not likely to flee or pose a danger to the safety of any other person or the community if released. Now, her attorney, Jason Bowles, said that he will appeal that decision. Hannah also has an appeal of her conviction pending in a higher court. Moving on to Sheriff Mickey Stines, who's accused of killing Judge Kevin Mullins. I did not do an episode on this when it happened because there were a lot of rumors flying around that were pretty scandalous, and I did not want to put anything out there until we had confirmation that what was being talked about was true. I was able to watch the preliminary hearing that he had, and there was only one witness called, Detective Clayton Stanford with the Kentucky State Police. Just to recap, on September 19th of this year, Sheriff Mickey Stines shot and killed Judge Kevin Mullins in his chambers. That shooting was caught on video. There was no audio, and they played that footage at the preliminary hearing. It was horrific. They showed it on the stream. I'm choosing not to put that on the channel. It is available if you want to see with a really quick Google search. I will say you cannot unsee it. And regardless of the situation, seeing somebody be killed on camera is something you can't unsee. So I urge extreme caution if you seek that out. They only showed about 10 or 15 seconds of that video at the preliminary. The defense gets up and asked about that video, and the witness says it lasted much longer. The witness did watch that in its entirety. And prior to the clip that was shown in court, Sheriff Stines used his phone to make phone calls and then makes a call from the judge's phone. And then that led to the shooting. The defense says that people were having a meeting in chambers prior to the sheriff entering. There were approximately 4 people. Once the sheriff enters, these other people exit. They've all been interviewed. He doesn't know what was said. The defense asked if there had been a hearing in chambers that day prior to the shooting, and the witness doesn't know. The camera is on all the time, and when asked if he knew why the camera was in there and if district judges' chambers have cameras, the witness says some do and some don't. When asked if they're used when proceedings are being held in chambers, he says yes. On that video was no audio, and once the 4 people left, they were able to hear some things from the next room. The witness says he doesn't know what was said. Now, the defense reminds the witness, you're in a preliminary hearing and you're an investigator in this murder, and there are witnesses who may have overheard what happened prior to the shooting, and you don't know what they've said. He said he hasn't personally watched the interviews, but he has talked to officers who conducted those. The defense reminds the witness this is a preliminary hearing and you can testify to hearsay. What did they hear? The witness says gunshots. One person did say she didn't recognize if it was the judge's voice, but did hear someone say help twice. When the witness arrived, the judge was still in the chambers. They did not locate a gun belonging to the judge in the chambers or on his person. The first person to arrive, he said, was someone named Trooper Bates, and his role was security of the crime scene. The witness and 3 detectives were in the chambers after the shooting, and they all looked for a firearm belonging to the judge. They talk about the lunch meeting between the sheriff and the judge before the shooting. It was at a restaurant just down the street from the courthouse, and several other people attended that luncheon. Once they left and returned to the courthouse, there was nothing to indicate, at least outwardly, there was an issue between the two men. The judge did make a statement to the sheriff asking if they needed to meet privately in chambers. Sheriff Stines, during that meeting that led to the shooting, asked to see Judge Mullins' telephone. The defense says in the longer portion of the video, the sheriff asked to see the judge's phone. Those phones were secured after the shooting, and they're currently at a forensic lab being downloaded. The witness says he has talked to the lab who is processing those phones. When asked if he knows the contents of the phone, the witness says he has not personally seen it. The defense asked if he's aware of any content that was relevant. He said he was told the sheriff tried to call his daughter from his personal phone as well as the judge's phone. The sheriff's daughter's phone number was on the judge's phone and had been called from that phone. Just want to throw in here, I did not mention this prior. The sheriff's daughter is a minor. So you have an issue here where it looks like the judge has been calling the sheriff's underage daughter. There has been nothing mentioned about an inappropriate relationship, at least officially by law enforcement. You guys can do the math. The witness is asked, based on his review of the moments before the shooting, the sheriff reviews the phone and was seated. The witness says yes, he was seated in front of the judge's desk. He looks at the cell phone, and then the witness is asked about the sheriff's reaction. The witness says you can't see his face, but he stood up, and within seconds, the shooting happened. When they showed the video in court of the actual shooting, somebody I believe to be the judge's wife was openly sobbing very loudly after this was played. The judge's phone was on the desk, and Sheriff Stein's phone was on his person. He doesn't know specifically what was open on the judge's phone as far as when it was recovered after the shooting. Sheriff Stein's daughter was interviewed with her mother present. Records from her cell phone, according to the witness, are possibly going to be obtained. When asked if it would be soon, the witness said it could be. The defense asked if they've attempted to get her phone downloaded or if the witness is just responding to the defense's questions. The witness says the calls should be the same on the judge's records as they are on the daughter's phone. He also said the sheriff's daughter made statements in her interview about what occurred during those conversations. When asked if Judge Mullins has apps outside of just the cell phone, the witness kind of skirts the question and says he's just not qualified to talk about that. There's an objection, and the judge says that the witness can testify about what he has personal knowledge of. The defense points out that it's not something that's captured by the cell phone records when they do the downloads of those. The cell phone records would be the same between the judge and the sheriff's daughter, but asked the witness, could additional information be found on apps? The witness says he doesn't know. He hasn't seen the reports. He does not know what apps the judge had on his phone. When asked if they intended to seek records from those apps, the witness says that could very well lead to additional search warrants and is possible. He's asked, were there any previous personal or professional issues between the sheriff and the judge? The witness says he's heard things about a lawsuit that the sheriff's office is involved with. The defense asked if that involved a criminal conviction of a deputy for sexual behavior in judges' chambers. The witness says yes. He's asked, did you observe the sheriff after the video? The witness says he was in custody when he personally arrived at the courthouse. His demeanor was mostly calm. They talked, but he didn't say anything about why the shooting happened. And all the sheriff said was to treat me fair. The defense asked if he made a statement about protecting his family. The witness says he was not present, but when the sheriff was taken into custody, the witness who's on the stand was told by another officer, the sheriff said, quote, they're trying to kidnap my wife and kid, end quote. The defense asked if there's any evidence that this shooting was premeditated, and the witness says not at this time. If you guys hear some thumping, there is a Chinook helicopter going over my house. That happens about every 15 minutes. We live very, very close to Asheville. So over my house is a direct line for them to get there. And it's just good to see so much help is going to the area. Back to it. The defense asked if he would agree with the evidence he has seen so far that the shooting was a reaction to what he saw on the cell phone. There is an objection, and that is sustained. He's asked if there's anything other than the content of the phone that the video would reveal why this took place. He says no. When asked if it appears this took place as a reaction to what happened in the judge's chambers, the witness said the shooting happened after a phone call was made, but he can't tell any more than that. When asked if the contents of the call was the tipping point for the shooting, he says he can't say that for a fact, but then again, he can't say it wasn't. The sheriff did not assert his right to an attorney, but the defense points out nobody from the sheriff's office tried to talk to him after his arrest. They obtained another phone that's being examined. The phone belongs to someone who works for the sheriff's office, and she voluntarily gave that phone to the person who was interviewing her after the shooting. It was regarding the lunch and things that led up to the shooting, according to the witness, but he doesn't know exactly what was said. He hasn't received any of the downloads from these phones yet. Those, as we know, are being sent for forensic examination. On redirect, they're asked what was the judge's cause of death. Multiple gunshot wounds. In the end, the judge found probable cause to bind the case over to the grand jury. Not a surprise. The defense says if there is an issue to extreme emotional disturbance, there would have to be evidence to rebut that, and says, when I asked the witness if there's any evidence to rebut that this occurred as a direct result in the moment of this observation, they have none. He says that he thinks the state has established probable cause for manslaughter first, but not murder. But the state says there's been no evidence presented today that there was an extreme emotional disturbance. However, there's been evidence that the judge was intentionally shot multiple times and killed by the sheriff, and that's probable cause for a murder charge. Now, the judge agreed with that. The defense wanted to discuss lodging of the sheriff, where he would be staying. The judge said he didn't think he could do anything to help, but the defense was able to stay after court to discuss it. But again, reminds the defense he doesn't think he can change where the sheriff is currently being held. This is going to be a very, very interesting one to watch. I'm curious to see what details are going to come out in the future. At trial, especially, we may know exactly why the daughter's phone number was on the judge's phone and what would lead that sheriff moments after getting that judge's phone and making a call to shoot him to death. Doesn't sound too good, but we will see what happens in the future. Now, moving on to Jessica Barnes, the local case. Actually, this was the last episode I did before the hurricane hit. I was able to attend that bond hearing in Anderson, at least outside. We weren't allowed in. The courthouse did not have power, and they held that bond hearing at the detention facility. Jessica's body was found when investigators searched the Twin Lakes at Lake Hartwell, but her body was in such bad condition, she had to be identified by dental records. Brandon had visited the area several times after Jessica went missing. Now, after they found Jessica's remains, the three, meaning Brandon, the two roommates, Kendall, who is the mother of one of Brandon's kids, as well as Victoria, who seems to be currently his girlfriend, they all three were interviewed and arrested and reportedly admitted to their roles in Jessica's murder. Brandon is charged with her murder. He killed her on August 2nd, the day after she was last heard from by her mother and father. She was strangled in a pool house behind a property where they were staying. Kendall and Victoria were charged with obstruction of justice, failure to report, and accessory after the fact. According to the arrest affidavit, they helped Brandon dispose of Jessica's remains. They did say more charges could be forthcoming. Now, they were denied bond this past Wednesday. The arrest affidavit says that Brandon strangled Jessica with his arms and Victoria witnessed the murder. There was a baby who was living in the home, and that child is now in the custody of Brandon's parents. Now, we know Brandon was telling people Kendall was his sister. If you go back and listen to that prior episode, if you haven't, we talk about that. But get this, y'all. Fitz News uncovered a marriage license that showed Brandon was already married to Kendall when he married Jessica. There was a marriage license that was obtained on July 31st, 2023, 5 months before he married Jessica. Now, on that marriage license, there is no date for marriage or who officiated the wedding, but Police Chief Crosby confirmed to Fitz News Brandon and Kendall were not divorced when he and Jessica married in January of this year. But in the middle of this, Brandon was seeing another woman. They began dating in August of 2023. They had met at work. She had no clue he was involved with the two other women, being Jessica and Kendall. And she told Fitz News they would all go on hikes, go to the lake. But when he brought an ultrasound photo of his baby with Kendall to work, the woman figured it all out and broke things off. Now, due to the seriousness of the murder charges he has admitted to, they do not plan to file additional charges for bigamy. Before his arrest, Brandon spoke to Troy Stiles of Blunt Force Media. I got to meet Troy last Wednesday. Great guy. Really good website. Go check it out. Both Fitz News and Blunt Force Media, fantastic news sites here locally. Highly recommend you bookmark their pages, and I'll link both of those in the description. But back to talking to Blunt Force Media. On September 24th, Brandon and Victoria both were spotted by Troy from Blunt Force Media. They were putting up a flyer for Jessica at Pendleton Square, and Brandon spoke to the outlet. They left and came back with the ashes of the baby that Brandon and Jessica lost. On that news article is a photo of him holding that little tiny box with his son's ashes. When asked if he had anything to tell Jessica, Brandon said, "I would tell her how much I love her. I wish I never went to work every day and ignored her. I ignored her voice, told her she was fine when I knew she wasn't. I was young and stupid. I was always focused on getting more money and more work. We never felt like we had hope in life. Always felt down, depressed, miserable, alone, seeking for help, hiding from help, never accepting it when it came, childhood trauma, being abused as a kid, blaming people for things we regret or done." He also read a letter to Troy that Jessica had written to him on their anniversary, or so he says. In the letter, reportedly written by Jessica, she mentions how much she loved him. She knows he was working hard for them and for their future and their children. And even Kendall, even though Kendall doesn't always show appreciation. She says he's the smartest 21-year-old with how he invests and saves, thinking about the future, and that's one thing she admires. In the letter, she says it's their anniversary, and she's writing it at 3:18 p.m. She said she's only seen him for a few minutes that day, and she says, "One day you'll see that I appreciate small, heartfelt things, but for now, I put up with the heavy burdens you carry, like working and taking Kendall with you, even though she admitted she treats you poorly on purpose. I'm extremely mad today, but you know that, and you're still putting up with me." That's a very typical statement for an abused woman, by the way, still blaming herself for his being upset. Brandon went on to tell Blunt Force Media that he would like to rebuild their relationship. He said he wasn't raised properly and wasn't disciplined much. Speaking to the allegations that were going around on social media saying that he did something to Jessica, which turned out to be 100% correct, he said, "It's just nasty. All the comments and the M word and all the other stuff. I could physically never do something like that." Well, you did, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life, bud. What a crazy situation for this beautiful, beautiful girl to get caught up in. Domestic violence. No joke, y'all. I just want to put this out there, by the way. If you or someone you love is experiencing domestic violence, there is a 24/7 domestic violence hotline by my two best friends, Brienne and Fruit Loop, who run the hiding place. 1-888-341-9568. Even though they are working remotely, they can direct you to resources in this area and anywhere across the country. Please get out while you can. These things never end well. In this case, we see the worst that can happen. People lose their lives. The family of Jessica Barnes gave a statement to Blunt Force Media after her remains were found. It says, "We are deeply saddened to share that Jessica is no longer with us. In her 20 years, she lit up every room she entered. Jessica had ambition, she had dreams, and her soul was a constant witness to others through her faith. We are profoundly thankful for the dedication of all the agencies involved in this case, especially the tireless work of Chief Robert Crosby of the Pendleton Police Department, who devoted himself to finding the answers we have shared today. With heavy hearts, we humbly return Jessica into the hands of Jesus, where we know she is now safe from her abuser. Her spirit is renewed and she is enveloped in the love she longed for so deeply while she was with us on this earth. We hope this serves as a message to domestic violence victims everywhere. Please reach out for help. Jessica was strong, but piece by piece, her strength was stripped away. We kindly ask for continued privacy in the coming days as we fully commit ourselves to being Jessica's voice. We will seek justice for her as her own voice has been diminished. With love, Cecilia and siblings." So that is her mother. Well, that's all the updates I have for this episode. Tomorrow, I plan to do a full episode on some new Diddy things that have came to light, but just a very sad ending to a very common tale. We see domestic violence abusers eventually do the worst. So please reach out if you are in a situation. You can get out and you can break free and start over. What I've heard of these women that are able to look back on the violence that they endured once they are free from it, people say it's like learning yourself all over again, but in a very beautiful way. Uh, Broken but beautiful, but you can piece that back together. Don't ever think it will get better because it won't. So, thank you guys again, those of you who donated to help out with the needs that we've had during this hurricane. It's still very bad around here, trees down everywhere, power lines on the roads. Just, it's going to take a while. And I sadly think that Western North Carolina, at least in our lifetime, will never look the way we grew up seeing it, which is this beautiful landscape full of beautiful people, so many missing, and just send your good thoughts and juju that way. All right, guys, that's it for me. So glad to be back doing something normal. So glad that my situation was nowhere near as bad those in Western North Carolina, but it's been very beautiful to see these communities band together. That's what we do here in the South. We band together. And we might not be family, but when things like this happen, you might as well be. All right, guys, that's it. We will see you soon with a new episode. Take care.